Hello, everybody. My name is Jason Butner. I'm the head of transformation for Valiantis and Atlassian Partner. We're actually the top global partner for all of Atlassian. And I'm going to talk today about the power of a connected enterprise and how it connects into, hitting our financial planning and analysis targets and goals with the companies that we work with to lead through various transformations. So the title of the presentation, as you can see here, is Your Budget is an Illusion. I used to, in full disclosure, I used to have a real job. I worked in the industry and I built multiple, or was part of a team that built multiple project management organizations on the scheduling side, planning side, financial side, contract management, risk, the whole thing, full tool, project controls, and portfolio management. And one thing I learned, and you'll see through this presentation, is that December 31st never lies. So we'll talk about that a little bit in this presentation. Any of you listening in today know that that's the truth. We can make up our forecast. We can make all the fancy predictions in the world and tell our leadership what we're probably going to spend for the year. But once December 31st hits, it doesn't lie. And we learned that the hard way. And I'm going to share some stories today about the hard way we learned and then the hard way we went through fixing that. So without further ado, let's get started. This is a story about a company named Ameren. They are a utility, electric and gas utility based out of St. Louis, Missouri. And this story is one of pain, and we'll get into it here in a second. So in 2010, they were in their transmission side of the business. They were spending about $25 million a year total. That was their capital portfolio. And you can see in 2015, it was, the number there was around 800 million, a little bit north of that. In fact, we used to say, the funny thing is in January of 2015, in the first 10 days, they spent more in the first 10 days than the entire year of 2010. And so that was an exciting period of growth for them. In fact, in the year 2012, it was starting to get pretty real that growth acceleration and capital spending was kind of hitting a climax. And that was all due to, to just kind of talk about the business reasons for a moment. There was a large power outage in the Northeast that some of y'all remember. If you were there, you definitely remember it. It affected tens of millions of customers. And so that exposed some vulnerabilities in the power grid, and that spurred some spending in the transmission side of the business, which hit nationwide, really continent wide. And then also just the aging infrastructure, failing infrastructure. And if you add into that renewables, so you'd have wind generation in the north, sun is shining for solar generation out west, and you've got to move that power across the country. That's also going to spur transmission growth. And then the last thing is just shutting down some of your legacy generation that was fossil generation. Every time you take a power plant offline, you've got to bring in transmission to replace that, that capacity in that load center. So, a lot of things converging at once that spurred a massive amount of transmission spending, which you're seeing here. And while that was exciting, it also created what we call the vortex of pain. So I showed up on the scene in about 2012 to help with this vortex of pain issue that was being experienced. And what that was because the company was looking for money to fund this transmission growth, they took about $60 million from the non-nuclear generation side of the business and brought it into the transmission side of the business in 2012. And that 60 million they brought over in about August of 2012 ended up being underspent. Again, December 31st never lies. So underspent by the time all the numbers came in from 2012. As you can imagine, that caused some problems. The rumor on the street, at least the talk of the town around the water cooler, was that Warren Buffett with Berkshire Hathaway Energy was, had his eye on Ameren. And there's all kinds of, things that can happen if you continue to run that kind of a pattern. Also, investors start fleeing. They don't really, they don't want to, invest their money in a company on the equity side of the business and then have that money not invested into the asset infrastructure and the capital spend. You just don't get the return. And so, what did we have? Angry investors. And I remember The CEO of the transmission side of the business had to go out to, I believe it was New York, and get berated by all these investors as to what happened and all these questions. And when she came back, she expressed all of that frustration and angst to the investors back to the business. And I remember some of the folks in the business had a little symbol for the CEO where they'd go like this when she was coming down the hall, which meant she was going to be angry. And she had gone off like a rocket and her head was stuck in the ceiling and her feet were dangling out. So that was like the warning sign that she's mad. And so she said, this can never happen again. We can never do this pattern again. We have more capital spending coming up than we had previously, and we have to fix these issues. So the first step was to look at what is creating the issue that $60 million was underspent in the business. And one of them was just lack of visibility. Again, everybody thought that it was going to get invested because it was showing up in the forecast in the budget tool, which was UIP at the time, Utility International Planner. That was the forecast and budget tool. So the visibility was wrong, though. Lots of documentation, lots of backup, but it was wrong. There's a variation in enterprise connective tissue. If you look across different businesses and you look at where all of the information is coming from, it's really interesting. Software, you can see software, financial services, manufacturing. If you look at construction, it is really disparate. You have a large contracting community out there. You have multiple shared services. There's really like a small core team of people managing this, multi-million-dollar, almost billion-dollar capital portfolio. But most of the people doing the work and spending and the contracts going out the door are sitting out in disparate teams. And that causes a problem with the connective tissue and the information flow back to the financial systems. So that was a known issue. And then all this noise. You got emails and PDFs and phone calls and, you name it, just tons of noise. There was clutter, meetings, but there was no clarity. All right. So we had to cut through that and figure out how to get through the noise and get the right information flowing. So we had decision-making data. So the message, and I wrote this down at a conference years and years ago. This is from my little Polly Pocket notebook where I would write down all the things from conferences where I was out learning. And I remember this quote. It stuck with me for all these years, and I still believe it to my core, that the good news is that you are perfectly aligned. I can go to any organization today, and it's a little kitschy, to say this, but it's true. You are perfectly aligned today to get the results that you're getting. And that was certainly the case with this company. They were perfectly aligned to get those results of that underspending. And so the question then is, do you want to realign? And that can be people, process, technology, as many of you guys know. That's not easy. It takes commitment. And you've got to form a hypothesis everybody can get behind. So the hypothesis here, all right, not to get too scientific about it, but you've got to make a hypothesis and test it. So the problem was lack of visibility, predictive control, all of that, people, process, technology, maturity. And here's the key. Look in blue. It says where the work was being performed. So again, all that disparate work, we had to get tools and people and process in place to put consistent tooling into the hands of all those people where the work was being performed, so that when they entered data about how things were changing and progressing, that data automatically made it back to the business. Okay, that was the problem. The solution was, the closer we tie our FP&A systems, which were not, there, to where the work was being performed, the more accurate our forecasting would be. It was a big deal with the forward rate making at the time that was being introduced, that it had to be accurate. It wasn't even so much about cost savings or accelerating capital work. It was about forecast accuracy and predictability. And if you could be accurate on your forecasting, you say what you'll do and then do what you say. All right, that was the mantra. Then it will lead to total shareholder return, which was, that was the golden goose. That was the target, was total shareholder return, which is essentially simply earnings plus dividends. Okay. So the outcome that we were looking for is if we can get an improvement in total shareholder return, then the way that formula would basically work is that we could prevent 1% of total shareholder return erosion for every $30 million in capital accuracy. So every 30 million we were off. So in that year we were 60 million off. It eroded our TSR by 2%. That's a problem, right? We could get that back by being accurate. And on the O&M side of the house, it was actually even more sensitive. It was about every $3 million in inaccuracy would erode our earnings. So if we can fix that inaccuracy, we can get back that earnings. So let's see if it could work. What did we have to do? We needed that decision data. And so to test the hypothesis, in short, we had to hire good people. This is year one. Hire good people, standardize planning technology, and provide training and enablement on fundamentals. All right, let's just do the basic blocking and tackling. It's like in football, it's like go up the middle, right? It's just fundamental football. Next is execute fundamental best practice on the large strategic in-flight projects and programs. So, a lot of those misses were on the biggest programs, and that's where you could definitely dedicate the people, the resources, the technology. And it would help justify technology purchases and things like that. And then execute that on those big in-flight projects and programs. After that, if that was working, then scale it to all the projects in the 5-year budget, automate the business processes, and integrate into the enterprise and implement analytics on top of that. So there was a lot tucked in there. But, that's another story for another day. But essentially, it's taking the success you had with the largest projects, scaling that across all 5 years of the budget planning horizon that the FP&A systems at least tracked. Now their integrated resource planning went out 20, 30 years and beyond. But as far as the budget performance and what was being reported internally and externally at the company, it spanned a 5-year budget cycle. Okay, so let's get it on all the projects in that planning horizon of 5 years. And then also automate business processes and another platform piece, and then integrate it into the enterprise. So span multiple groups, and then put analytics over the top of that, and solid enough data governance practices to where that data would flow up. All right. And then go across multiple portfolios in the organization. It eventually, that planning process spanned across IT, generation, distribution, facilities, and et cetera, across the business. All right. So one of the hardest things, if you guys choose to go on this path, this journey of connecting your systems that the planning is occurring in to the systems where you're tracking your financial planning and analysis, your FP&A systems, is these 4 things. WBS, which is the work. It's what are you doing? Work breakdown structure. All right, that's happening in your tools where the work is being done. Your organizational breakdown structure, who's doing the work, that can be important. Your asset breakdowns. So what are the things you're actually working on, the things that the company owns. If you're doing capital work, it's work that's being done to either replace assets or put new assets in the ground. And then cost breakdown structure. And the CBS and the WBS overlap is where a lot of companies lose their resolve, I'll say. So I've never done a project like this, been a part of a project where it's simple here. So you got to kind of make like some people call it a Rosetta Stone, whatever resonates with you, but it's basically the translation between the work being performed and the, your accounting systems, your general ledger. Like how does that translate into your general ledger, your estimating systems, and even your retirement unit coding? I mean, all of that can be captured here. So at this company, when we were working with them, I think it was like iteration 140 something or 170 something before they actually locked in and moved forward with that translation coding. All right. That's to just give you an idea. It is excruciating, but what did it buy? So it bought them the ability to now take all of that fundamental planning that was now clear, good information coming from the field, and translate that into value. So here's an example of a critical infrastructure program that was being managed where basically, there was $1 million a day fine that NERC, the National Energy Reliability Corporation, it was kind of like the henchman of the Federal Energy Regulatory Committee. so they could go in and they could impose fines if this work that was basically deemed regulatory or mandatory from a compliance perspective, if that was not put in on time, they could leverage fines. And that was $1 million a day. So that's a big deal. And this is across hundreds of projects, hundreds of substations. And so, you know, it's it's a mess. You need to know who's doing the work, when it's going to be performed, and if the company has the capacity to do this. So you're looking at kind of a demand versus capacity histogram right here. And the gray bars are just signifying we now have identified work that has to be complete in a period of time, but nobody's assigned to do that work. So we used to have this mantra, this chant that went, make the gray go away. And it was kind of corny sounding, but it was basically the process of assigning that work to people. And then that becomes a real plan. And if you have the capacity to do that and it's assigned, you have a lot higher probability of that work being performed. If it's unassigned, guess what you get? You get another $60 million underrun because nobody's actually assigned to do the work. It may show up in your plan as getting done, but nobody's doing it. And so this was a key part of the process. Again, that was visibility that you're seeing here. And then just packaging that work. As you guys know, some of you guys are more on the project side of the house where you're managing and executing work. Some of you are more on the financial side of the house where you're tracking the financial impacts of that work. But what you guys know across both sides of that, business is that these projects are often interrelated to one another. Not every project lives in its own world where you can manage its timing and its execution independent of other work. And so that can either result in things like programs or at least dependencies across projects. And so we would package this work inside the program into smaller packages that were dependent on one another and had visibility on that packaging. That was a big deal because then you could assign certain key pieces of work and get procurement benefits or other things like that and manage the work in a packaged fashion. And ultimately, what you're seeing here is a dashboard that was given to the CEO of the company that showed an in-service date milestone, which you see there, that's being tracked for the entire program. And you can see on all entities of the business, the mandatory date so that no fines were leveraged was August of 2018. And you see here that the program is being completed by August of 2018. Now, if on this graph, for instance, September of 2018 showed up and some of that stuff slipped, there'd be an automatic alert. It would go to the right people. And whenever they got that alert, you better believe there was a phone call, an email, or some kind of smoke signal that came across the wire. And it was, hey, what's going on? What are we doing about it? How are we going to fix it? And so anyway, as you guys know, we're in 2024 right now. So August 2018 is passed. And I don't have the shot in here, but the business got $0 in fines. Other utilities did pay millions of dollars in fines for not bringing their programs in. And NERC did leverage fines against them, but this company paid $0 in fines. So there was already business benefit demonstrated in this process. And we haven't even gotten to the TSR stuff yet, the total shareholder return stuff. So that is an example of how visibility on where the work is being performed. This is data that was in analytics coming up from the work, the systems that were tracking where the work was being performed, and then making sure that that didn't have an impact financially on the company. All right. So now let's talk about this for a second. Now, well, 2012 was, this is the nice way of saying it, the year of transformation. We called it the vortex of pain earlier. But while it was the vortex of pain or the year of transformation, 2012 to 2015 ended up being no underruns in any of those years. And we call that the oasis of peace. All right. No angry investors, no rocket going off, head into the ceiling, feet hanging out, none of that, because we were, we were helping the company to hit those targets year over year and nail them. In some cases in 2015, it was less than $30,000 off at December 31st over an $813 or $815 million capital spend forecast. So we were originally setting out to dub it, forecast accuracy, and ended up somebody's coined it forecast hyper accuracy because it was within decimals of a percent off when it came in. What did that result in? Well, let's look at the results. This is all public stuff right here. This is shareholder reports. And you can see here, I'm going to move my mouse. The chart below indicates shareholders have seen a total shareholder return, again, earnings plus dividend, of nearly 60% over the 3-year period from December 31st, 2012, that was kind of the bad moment. Okay, so what's going to be done to fix it through December 31st of 2015. So across that 3-year period, 60% total shareholder return. All right, let's talk about this for a second. Included allocating more capital to areas of the business with constructive regulatory frameworks, maintaining disciplined cost management, and so on and so forth. There's a quick story in there. Whereas, again, if you guys are in the financial side of the house, or at least the project side of the house, interacting with the financial side of the house, you guys know that you get the phone call, like on a Friday. I've had this happen multiple times. On the Friday, you get the phone call from the controller or the CFO, basically that says, hey, by Monday or Tuesday or whatever next week, I want multiple scenarios of an updated forecast plan. And so before all these tools were in place, when I had, my quote unquote real job, I remember many weekends of coming into work and working, 12 or more hours a day, Saturday, Sunday, and so on, to go through Excel and all this manual data downloading to try to put together these updated financial forecast scenarios to take to the CFO or the controller. And it was painful and terrible. I remember missing vacations at times because of, kind of our accrual management process not being automated and having to do some of this, scenario planning. But look at this. We got the CFO call, in this period. CFO says, I want to lay $650 million into the upcoming forecast, our 5-year horizon. And I need this, pronto. So the business goes to engineering, and engineering says, well, I know what work we want to do. All right. There's a lot of work that needs to be done out there, but I don't know, when it can be done or who's going to do it or whatever. So they went to the business performance side of the house, which, was the folks that were interacting on the finance planning. And they said, well, we have access to the FP&A systems, the budget tool, but that doesn't really tell us who's going to do the work and all that. So they went to the estimating side of the house, and they said, well, we know what all that work that you identified engineering, we know what it's going to cost. But again, when is it going to be done? So then they went to the scheduling and planning side of the house. And those were the folks that had the planning tools that pulled all this stuff together. Remember that histogram that I showed you before? Let me go back a few slides. Okay. Remember this? So these histograms were available portfolio wide, and you could see the ups and downs of how to levelize that work. So if you're going to dump additional work, $650 million in, you better know that you're going to make an executable plan. And so because these tools were in place, what could the business do? Let's go back forward here. Allocate more capital to areas of the business. In fact, there were some areas of the business that had a 12.38% return on equity. It was unheard of in the utility industry, and they wanted more money put into that area of the business, which was going to benefit customers. And so, the business was able to do that. And that's how you get a 60% return, total shareholder return. So how does that compare? Is that great? Is that good? Is that mediocre? Well, let's look. The Philadelphia Utility Index, 34% over that same period. The S&P 500 utilities, 39%. Ameren, 60%. So literally almost doubled the utility index, and then 60% versus 39% across all the S&P 500 utilities. Massively outperforming, attract investors back. Everybody's happy, shouting for joy. This stuff works. So hypothesis proven, and then up, dividend and earnings, up. So hypothesis was proven. If we connect where the work is being performed and get visibility into that and tie that in via the WBS-CBS overlap into the financial planning and analysis systems, then we'll have the amount of financial control to make those earnings happen. So let's transition for just a moment. Let's talk about what that looks like. All right. So in this world of where the work is being performed, I keep using that term, the system of work, where the work is being performed, where the decisions are being made. When things change, we made a plan and now it's changing, which never happens, of course. But anyway, when things change, where is that work being performed? Well, you've got upfront planning. So think of portfolio intake, prioritization, optimization of the portfolio. That eventually goes into the management of the work. Think of scheduling, execution, monitor and control closeout. These are some of the PMP concepts, but there's also, obviously more agile methodologies that surround IT planning and development, or just forget about IT. I mean, any type of work that's not entirely scopable, those agile practices can come into play. It's not quite as waterfally. That, pick your poison, but the work management, how you schedule and plan and execute that work, monitor it, and close it out. And then think about your business process engine. Where is all of that strategic alignment happening? Enterprise scaling, optimization, business process management, workflows, all of that. Okay. Where is the best practice being tracked when there's changes? Who's tracking that? Where is all that being captured? Are you staying ahead of those changes? So that's the work being performed. That's happening at the level where decisions are being made. And then if you bring all that up through a good governance architecture into an analytics that lays on top of it, that's essentially your system of work. I mean, we could get into more architectural details. This is, just the basics. And the important thing here that I'm pointing out is not just saying, okay, this isn't a system architecture diagram. The point of this is to say, this is what gives you the ability to predict the future, to tell you what's going to happen. If you're in the financial side of the house, the project side of the house, the portfolio side of the house, every day, if you kind of break down your job, we're making predictions about the future. We're estimating. What is an estimate? It's a prediction of how much something's going to cost. What is a expected finish date? It's a time frame you think you're going to be done. What is a forecast? It's an amount of money across a portfolio or project that you think you're going to spend. So these are all essentially, they're like promises. If you think about it, that we're making promises about the future. So that's really important. And about our work, whether it's a project side of the house and you're delivering projects, or you're delivering features or epics or sprints, those are units of work that you're promising. Contrast that with accounting systems like your ERP system, asset management, document management, budget system, so on and so forth. The unit of work is a actual or a transaction or an asset or a document. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not what you're delivering on the work side of the house. Okay, those are other units of work. And each one of those systems will say things like, oh, we've got a module that does that. ERP might have a project management module, or, your document management system might have a business process module in it with workflow. But is that really going to be the system of work where people are performing the work and give you the tools you need to make those promises accurate? No. But again, they're not wrong. They're not bad. We still have to use those systems. And so they tell you what has already happened, but we need to connect to those. We may need documents flowing between, Confluence or, our work in process document management and our document repository. We may need forecast information coming from a forecasting engine within our system of work and being pushed into our budget system on a regular basis according to the close process. We may need actuals coming in from, the system where we're tracking actuals and assigning, them and understanding what those went to, tracking back and forth to our ERP. So this is the kind of thing that we help our customers build, is to get them solid in the system of work and then get that information flowing back and forth the right way to the other systems across the enterprise. And that's why we call it the connected enterprise, which was in the title of this webinar here. So I want to talk a little bit about why we're bad at planning overall and why data is so important. It's a little thing called the planning fallacy. This is something that is kind of fascinating to the geeky side of me. Some of you guys might find it fascinating. Some of you guys might already know about it. But if you haven't heard about it, the planning fallacy is a phenomenon that basically we're just bad at planning as people. It's kind of like I tell my wife, hey, I'm going to go out and clean the garage. And, she's like, okay, great. When are you going to be done? And I said, I'll be back in a couple hours. And then like the entire weekend goes by and I'm not even halfway done. So you guys know that you've been there. All right. I've got to fix my daughter's car coming up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I know there's no way to predict how long this is going to take. I've got to replace the radiator. So I'm about to enter the world of planning fallacy myself again. Anyway, we typically underestimate the time needed to get things done. Even if you look here at the second part that's highlighted, even if we have lots of knowledge of past tasks of a similar nature. So even if I've worked on a car a lot or cleaned my garage a lot, I still tend to underestimate the time needed to get it done. So even though we have people that are experts at all of this stuff in our businesses, we're just bad at planning. And I can exemplify that. This isn't just a theory. The Sydney Opera House, for instance, 1,450% over budget. This is wild. And I believe if anyone's watching this from Australia, hold me to this. They actually had to raise a lottery to get this thing paid off. That's the fun fact about this project, besides the fact that it was so over budget. So we all look at it, it's beautiful right now, but those of you who remember, that's what happened. The big dig in Boston, big mess. It went multiple X over budget. And I think it was originally going to be 2 billion, ended up being 8 billion. All right. And the thing still leaks. That's the fun fact about that. We've spent $8 billion to get a tunnel that still leaks. And then the Denver International Airport is a really funny one. That one was, again, supposed to be around 2 billion, ended up around $4 billion. It was so over budget. There were so many delays and there was so much secrecy around it. The fun fact here is that people started to suspect that there was some kind of Freemason weird involvement, or there was alien and Illuminati activity happening at the airport. It's the craziest thing in the world. So between having to raise a state lottery to pay off your project, thinking the Illuminati was involved, and getting a project that's, multiple X over budget that leaks in Boston, this is how big of a deal the planning fallacy is for our businesses. And the solution there is what? Well, it's data. The reason this worked at Ameren is that the company got the data they needed to make those decisions. Again, decision data, not precision data. It's the oil, gold, whatever terminology we want to use, but we've heard that before. Data is the oil now, or the gold of our century. And so if it's the new gold, we need to see what teams are working on, align it with company objectives, get consistent data, which involves that good governance structure, which Valiantis, that's one of the things we specialize in, is saying, okay, well, we don't just do cloud migration and transformation. We don't just do, moving data from one side to the other. We don't just do implementations. We actually handle the process side of the house, which is think about governance and ways of working, helping to configure your business properly to be able to use these tools, and then give you the training and enablement necessary as well to get consistent data. All right. And then you can get new insights from this data that you've never had before if you get it to roll up at the portfolio level, new ways of measuring and monitoring the business. So we tend to turn that into business cases. So in this example right here, we did what if scenario planning for another utility company. And you can see here, there's a business case attached to that. So there's business value to be extracted from these use cases, if you think about it. And we're pretty good at identifying what that value is as well, and working with your teams to say, okay, well, how can we find cost savings opportunities and market opportunities, reduce project conceptualization time and other things like that, and then demonstrate that the investment into people, process, technology in your transformation is going to pay itself off and then some. Okay, and these are just examples right here. But what else can you do with data? Oh, hang on. kind of went back. Okay, we'll just show that. Yep, I'm gonna have to remember how to use PowerPoint here. Okay, so thinking about this again, what can we do with that data? And the other thing that we can do with it that we hear a lot about is artificial intelligence. And so I just want to touch on this for a second. You can't do a webinar in these days without talking about AI. I used to, I helped build an AI company and run it for multiple years. And I learned a lot about AI. I presented, like, as I mentioned, I presented this at the Gartner CFO conference in DC back in May. And everything was AI, AI, AI. All right. And I know you guys are receiving a lot of pressure, either, from your leadership or, just maybe you're interested in the realm of AI and what can be done. But what I found when we go to most companies is that it's kind of like under delivering on the promise. All right. And that's not to say anything is wrong with artificial intelligence or machine learning, whatever moniker we would put on what we're doing. But, there's a couple of, it's just generally under delivering. I think we're out there frenetically looking for the value and not finding it lately. And a couple things I've just learned about it is that you've got to have good data, period. And some of you guys know this, but you just have to. And so again, everything we've talked about in this webinar involves building out reliable, consistent, visible, good data that you can use. And so if you do have a desire to move forward with AI, you have initiatives at your company to move forward with artificial intelligence, you're looking for use cases where you could get business benefit, definitely reach out to us, because the first step is always going to be to get your data right. And we're experts at that. And we worked with many companies at that level. Sometimes I get questions. When I was at the conference, I got some questions around, what are the biggest challenges with AI? And again, I had this company, and besides getting the data right, which is probably one of your biggest challenges, is, it has to be consistent, visible, available, all of that. And then you have to curate it. You have to really analyze it. Then once you have this large amount of good data, how much of it are you really going to use? And is there bias involved in the data based on how you train your models? And again, not to overly, pitch Valiantus here, but we have an entire AI consultancy that we work with companies, whether you're brand new to AI or you're pretty advanced. We can come in and do anything from just help with, getting some basic concepts started for you guys, all the way to helping some of the most advanced companies out there who are using AI. We can help, really refine the use cases. So anyway, the other kind of big problem is just actually developing a solid value statement and use case. People think too generally, but really, what is the specific kind of boutique use case at your company where you can demonstrate value? So I like to think of things in terms of value versus complexity. And if you can show value in, initiating, proving out, and building an AI use case at your company, even if it's in a niche area, then identify what that value is, which we're showing right here, and then identify the complexity of that project. And if you can find a low complexity project that delivers some value, even if it's niche or boutique in your company, you're going to at least learn a lot along the way. You're going to earn some business value, and you're going to make some believers, and you're going to be successful. And like I mentioned, we love working with our customers at this level too. I've not thrown AI out. It's not, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but we've learned a lot over the years on how to help customers be successful in implementing AI use cases at their company. So anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I hope you got some value out of this. And let's just kind of recap on this. The hypothesis is get the systems where the work is being performed, get them solid. Your people, process, and technology, get that solid where the work is being performed. Tie that into FP&A, and then you can get accurate forecasting, which in the case of the Ameren story led to high total shareholder return that way outpaced the market. And it was a successful hypothesis. So we've been doing that with companies all across the globe. Would love to work with you. And if you have any questions, please reach out. My name is Jason Butner, and my email and all my contact information is in the chat. So, and some other upcoming events are noted in the chat. And of course, you can always go out to YouTube and watch this video as well. The link is in the chat. So thanks for joining today, guys. Appreciate you, and look forward to talking with you soon. Thanks.